So you have this, this incredible supercomputer in your pocket right now.
Right. Everybody does.
Yeah. And it can access the entirety of human knowledge. It can stream a live video feed from the International Space Station. It can instantly translate ancient Greek.
All of it.
And I think if we're being completely honest with ourselves here, we have literally never been more profoundly bored.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very specific kind of boredom, too.
Exactly. You sit on the couch, you're just bathed in this harsh, sterile blue light from a screen, and you're just endlessly scrolling through this infinite feed of, algorithmically generated slop, and you feel absolutely nothing.
Just a low-grade apathy.
Yeah, just total apathy. We're drowning in technological miracles, but our primary emotional response is just exhaustion.
Right.
But today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating radical cultural rebellion against that exact apathy.
And it's a rebellion that doesn't use virtual reality or neural implants or anything like that.
No. Ironically, it uses a technology that basically reached its absolute peak around, 1940?
Give or take, yeah? The golden age.
Right. So for the listener, I want you to mentally just pull your car off that frantic 10-lane digital superhighway for a minute. Just picture this. We are currently sitting inside the little station on Commercial Street.
It's such a great space.
It really is. It's a physical studio right here in the historic river town of Atchison, Kansas. And right between us on the desk, there's this gorgeous vintage radio.
The tubes are glowing.
Yeah, the vacuum tubes inside, they take a full minute to warm up, and they cast this soft, living amber glow across all this wood paneling. I've got a fresh pot of coffee brewing, which smells amazing.
Much needed, honestly.
Oh, for sure. The heavy mechanical switch of the on-air R sign just snapped down. And if you were looking out the big glass windows of the station with us right now, on this specific morning, July 18th, 2026, you'd see the brick streets out there just totally packed with people.
Right, because the annual Amelia Earhart Festival is kicking off today.
Exactly. I mean, you can actually hear it. A minute ago, there was this deep, throaty rumble of a vintage radial aircraft engine just circling right over the Missouri River bluffs.
I saw a kid walk by the window a second ago carrying a little model airplane, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're anchoring ourselves in this very physical reality today to ask a specific question. How did this project called Chesterton Radio, which, ostensibly started as just an archive for old-time broadcasting, how did it evolve into this massive, comprehensive, literary, philosophical, and cultural world?
Well, the contrast you just painted right there is the perfect entry point, because we're sitting in this really calm, lamplit space. We've got these analog microphones, but there's a vibrant summer festival humming just inches away on the other side of the glass.
Right.
It completely mirrors the fundamental tension of Chesterton Radio itself. I mean, for anyone who just casually stumbles across their platforms, the initial assumption might be pretty dismissive.
Yeah, you might just look at it and think, oh, this is just a digital museum.
Exactly. You think, oh, it's just a repository for public domain MP3s of classic radio dramas, just dusty old files.
Right, just nostalgia.
But when you actually analyze the ecosystem they've built, it is far more ambitious than that. It's this living community that's attempting to resurrect a very specific mode of human imagination.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that right out of the gate.
Go for it.
Because whenever we talk about, resurrecting the past, we always have to address the nostalgia trap. Humans have this terrible habit of viewing the past through rose-colored glasses.
Oh, absolutely. The good old days that never really existed.
Right. So is Chesterton Radio actually creating a dynamic, forward-looking cultural movement? Or is this just like a 1940s bunker? Are people just retreating into the aesthetics of the golden age of radio because they're terrified of how complex 2026 is?
That is a completely fair and necessary skepticism to have.
Because I think a lot of people listening to us right now might understandably be skeptical of anything that relies too heavily on just looking backward.
Well, right. If this were merely an exercise in vintage aesthetics, if it were just about playing big band music and wearing fedoras and pretending it's 1945, it would be totally culturally irrelevant.
Just a novelty act.
Exactly, just cosplay. But the architecture of Chesterton Radio isn't built on nostalgia at all. It's actually built on a specific philosophical diagnosis of the modern world.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
So, you have to look at the three words that make up their overarching motto. They stamp this across every single platform they operate.
Right. It's stories, ideas, wonder.
Stories, ideas, wonder. That isn't just some catchy marketing slogan they came up with in a boardroom. It's actually a sequential cognitive process.
Interesting.
And it all traces back to the namesake of the station, the early 20th century philosopher and author G.K. Chesterton.
Right.
There's this specific assertion Chesterton made that basically acts as the foundational operating system for this entire project. He wrote, "The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder."
Wow. The world will never starve for want of wonders, but only for want of wonder. Let's really break down the mechanics of that quote because it perfectly captures that smartphone paradox we started the deep dive with.
Exactly.
I mean, the device in your hand is an objective wonder. By any historical metric, it is a technological miracle.
It's magic, basically.
Right. But the human capacity for wonder-like, that internal psychological lens that allows you to actually feel awe or gratitude or amazement, that's a completely separate muscle.
And it's a muscle that is seriously atrophying right now.
Yeah, we just scroll past literal miracles every single day with completely glazed over eyes.
Which is exactly what Chesterton predicted, over a century ago.
Really? 100 years ago?
Oh, yeah. He understood that humanity's ultimate existential threat wasn't going to be a lack of scientific advancement, and it wasn't going to be a lack of visual stimulation.
Then what was it?
The true threat was the deadening of the imagination. It's this creeping cynicism that just looks at the universe and declares it mundane.
Man, that hits close to home.
Right. So when Chesterton Radio sequences their mission as stories, ideas, wonder, they are actively providing a therapeutic mechanism for that cynicism.
Okay, so how does that sequence actually work in practice?
Well, the stories, whether that's, a tightly plotted 1940s murder mystery or a huge sci-fi epic or a comedic drama, the stories serve as the vehicle. They capture your attention.
Right, that gets you in the door.
Yeah. And then the ideas are the cargo hidden inside that vehicle, the moral dilemmas, the philosophical inquiries into human nature, the exploration of justice and mercy.
I love that, the cargo.
And then finally, the wonder is the neurological and spiritual destination. It's that awakened state of mind you're left with when the broadcast actually concludes.
I want to dig much deeper into this idea of a society that's dying from a lack of wonder. Because the station recently produced this incredibly detailed analysis of Chesterton's 1904 novel, The Napoleon of Notting Hill.
Oh, that was a brilliant deep dive they did.
It really was. And honestly, when you look at how they dissect this book, it completely dismantles the idea that Chesterton Radio is just some superficial nostalgia trip.
Right.
It proves they are engaging in really high-level cultural critique. So for anyone listening who isn't familiar with The Napoleon of Notting Hill, Chesterton wrote it in 1904, but he said it in the distant futuristic year of 1984.
Which is just wild to think about, the year 1984,
Yeah.
because that immediately forces this fascinating historical juxtaposition. I mean, George Orwell wouldn't publish his definitive dystopian novel in 1984 until decades later.
Right.
So when we compare these two visions of the future Orwell's versus Chesterton's, we actually uncover the exact reason Chesterton Radio exists today.
Let's lay out that comparison because it is so stark.
Go ahead.
So Orwell's 1984, that's the dystopia we're all intimately familiar with.
Right.
It's the dystopia of absolute, crushing totalitarian control.
Big Brother.
Big Brother, the thought police, the Ministry of Truth. It operates entirely on the mechanism of fear and pain to enforce state compliance.
A boot stamping on a human face forever.
Exactly. But Chesterton's 1984 is radically different. In The Napoleon of Notting Hill, London hasn't been conquered by a violent dictator. It has been conquered by comfortable indifference.
Comfortable indifference, that is such a terrifying phrase.
It is. Chesterton imagined a society that had become so perfectly safe, so relentlessly rational, and so utterly sterilized of any risk that the citizens simply stopped caring about anything.
They're a civilization that's just dying of sheer apathy.
Yeah, the bureaucrats run everything smoothly, but people have totally lost their local patriotism, their love of their own neighborhoods, their poetry, their art. They're just coasting on this comfortable gray plateau.
And what's fascinating here is when you evaluate the cultural landscape of 2026, you have to ask yourself, which of those two dystopias feels more accurate to your daily experience?
Oh, man.
I mean, while authoritarianism is obviously always a genuine threat, the day-to-day reality for most people interacting with the modern internet is far closer to Chesterton's vision.
We are absolutely being smothered by comfort and convenience.
Exactly. We have frictionless access to literally every consumer good and every piece of entertainment imaginable. And the result is this profound, isolating indifference.
We don't have to fight for anything, but we also don't believe in anything.
Right. And that brings us to the plot of the novel, which they explored so well. It's wonderfully absurd, but it's also entirely profound.
Yeah, explain the plot for the listeners, because it's so weird but so good.
Okay, so in Chesterton's sterile future, the King of England is chosen completely at random, essentially by a lottery system.
Naturally.
And the man who happens to be chosen is this government clerk named Auberon Quinn, who is essentially just a massive cynic and a prankster.
He's basically a troll.
He is a 1904 internet troll.
Yes.
Yes. So as a massive joke, Quinn decides to reinstate all this medieval pageantry for the various neighborhoods of London. He designs ridiculous coats of arms, these colorful robes, and he gives the local provosts halberds and banners.
Just to mess with them.
Exactly. He's doing it to mock them, to amuse himself, because he's so terribly bored in this gray world.
But the critical pivot in the story, and this is the mechanism that actually cures the societal indifference, it happens when this young man named Adam Wayne becomes the provost of Notting Hill.
Right.
Because Auberon Quinn created all this pageantry as a cynical joke. But Adam Wayne, he takes it completely seriously.
He doesn't get the joke, or he refuses to.
He refuses to.
Yeah.
He looks at the red robes and the halberds and the banner of his local borough, and his moral imagination is just instantly awakened. He begins to treat Notting Hill not as just some administrative district, but as a sacred homeland worth fighting for.
He takes the symbols seriously.
Yes. And by doing so, he unexpectedly awakens courage and loyalty and this fierce imagination in the people around him. He totally shatters that gray apathy with this splash of vibrant, unapologetic color.
And that right there is the entire thesis statement for Chesterton Radio.
How so?
They are Adam Wayne in a digital world full of Auberon Quinns.
Oh, wow. That's a great way to frame it.
Right, because the modern internet is largely populated by irony and cynicism and algorithmic slop that's just designed to keep us endlessly scrolling.
Nothing means anything.
Exactly. But Chesterton Radio is taking the symbols seriously. They are insisting that classic literature, moral imagination, and beautiful storytelling still actually matter. They're treating the theater of the mind as a vital cultural battleground.
Let's explore that phrase, the theater of the mind, because it really explains the biological and psychological, the how of this entire project.
Yeah, the actual mechanics of it.
If you're a listener interacting with the station's Substack, which, by the way, they treat as this sort of written headquarters and community forum, you will frequently see this specific sentiment echoed by the audience.
The famous quote.
Yeah, one listener submitted a comment that has practically become an unofficial secondary motto for the station. They just wrote, very simply, "The pictures are so much better on the radio."
The pictures are so much better on the radio.
Yeah.
It sounds like a clever paradox, but it's actually a deeply accurate neurological observation.
Let's talk about what actually happens in your brain when you're watching a modern, prestige television show on a streaming platform versus what happens when you listen to a pristine, restored audio drama from, say, 1948.
It's night and day.
Right. When you watch the TV show, absolutely every sensory detail is provided for you.
Right. The set designer decided exactly what the wallpaper looks like.
The lighting director decided exactly how the shadows fall across the detective's face. The CGI artists built the entire cityscape outside the window. You, as the viewer, are entirely passive. You're just a receptacle for someone else's complete imagination.
You don't have to do any cognitive heavy lifting at all.
None.
But audio demands a partnership. When you strip away the visual input, your brain's default mode network and your visual cortex, they don't just shut down. They actually kick into this hyperactive state of compensation.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. Let's look at the actual mechanics of Golden Age radio production, specifically the Foley artists.
Oh, the sound effects people.
Yes. The people who created the live sound effects right there in the studio. In a 1940s broadcast of a detective noir, you don't actually see the detective walking down the street. Instead, you hear the crisp, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of hard leather shoes, which the Foley artist is creating by literally walking in place on a tiny square of concrete next to the microphone.
Right.
Then you hear the faint, mournful wail of a foghorn. And then the narrator drops his voice into this low, intimate register and just says, "London, 1895.
And instantly, in a fraction of a second, your brain constructs the entire set.
Boom, it's there.
You design the cobblestones, you feel the damp chill of the Thames River in your bones, you place the flickering gas street lamps exactly where they need to be.
And the most beautiful part of this whole neurological phenomenon is that if 100,000 people are listening to that exact same broadcast of Chesterton Radio at the exact same moment,
Right.
there are 100,000 distinct, custom-built versions of London existing simultaneously in their minds.
No two listeners paint the exact same picture.
Exactly. The storytelling becomes this intensely intimate collaboration between the broadcaster and the listener's own memories and subconscious.
It forces the listener out of that passive consumer's stupor and forces them to become an active co-creator of the art.
And the cognitive engagement required is significantly higher, which is why the emotional resonance is often so much deeper.
Speaking of emotional resonance, the station shared this wonderful anecdote that I think really highlights how universally compelling this specific cadence of storytelling can be.
Oh, the dog story.
Yes. A community member wrote in to say that every single evening, when they turn on their phone to play one of the classic radio dramas, their dog actually comes into the room, sits down on the rug, and just stares intently at the phone for the entire duration of the play.
That is incredible.
They literally wrote, "Even my dog loves your brilliant plays."
It is such a brilliant visual, just a golden retriever totally engrossed in an episode of suspense or like a Sherlock Holmes mystery.
But if you analyze it, it makes complete sense.
Yeah, right. Animals obviously don't understand the vocabulary, but they are incredibly sensitive to tone, pacing, and cadence.
And the actors from the golden age of radio were absolute masters of vocal cadence.
They had to be.
Because they lacked any visual expressions, they had to convey warmth, terror, authority, comfort entirely through just the microfluctuations of their vocal cords. It's an art form that has largely been lost in modern voice acting, which usually relies on visual cues to carry the emotional weight.
Golden Age radio actors really knew how to project a tangible presence into a room.
Presence and companionship. That is a vital element of this whole thing.
It is. In their own manifestos, Chesterton Radio describes their broadcasts as a familiar voice in the dark, a story at the end of a long day, a reminder that someone else is listening to.
Which is so needed right now.
We are living through an unprecedented epidemic of loneliness. You can have 5,000 connections on a social media platform and still spend your entire weekend completely isolated in a quiet apartment.
Yeah, feeling totally alone.
So the continuous, curated flow of these classic stories provides this gentle, civilized companionship that modern algorithmic feeds simply cannot replicate.
Well, let me just grab a quick refill of this coffee here.
Go for it.
Thanks. That actually perfectly transitions us to the architecture of this digital community. Because if we are being ruthlessly pragmatic for a second, we have to ask a really difficult question.
Okay, what is it?
If you are trying to cultivate a quiet, thoughtful, anti-algorithmic theater of the mind, how on earth do you survive in a 2026 digital ecosystem?
It's tough.
Because let's look at the platforms they're actually using. They've built different homes or like rooms across the internet to reach listeners, and the main front porch of this community is YouTube.
Yes, their YouTube channel, Chesterton Radio Theater, is massive. We are talking about over 77,000 subscribers and more than 7,200 distinct videos.
It's huge.
It operates as the grand entrance for the uninitiated. It's where you find the restored radio dramas, the top 10 countdowns, documentaries, all these special productions.
But here's where I have to throw a flag on the play.
Uh-oh.
Isn't this a massive contradiction? I mean, YouTube is the belly of the beast.
Yes.
It is this hyper-modern, algorithmically aggressive, video-first platform designed by some of the smartest engineers in the world to maximize visual attention and keep you endlessly clicking on sensationalist thumbnails.
Right.
So how can a project dedicated to 1940s audio storytelling, slowing down, and cultivating wonder possibly thrive in an environment literally designed to induce ADHD? Aren't they just feeding the very monster they are trying to fight?
It is an absolute paradox, I'll give you that, but it is a highly calculated one.
Okay, defend it.
We have to separate the medium from the message, or rather the distribution tower from the signal.
What do you mean?
Think about it. In 1940, a radio station didn't care if you received their signal on a massive, beautiful Zenith console in your parlor or on some cheap, tiny crystal set you built in your garage. Their only objective was to get the signal through the airwaves to wherever you happen to be. Chesterton Radio looks at YouTube and Apple and Spotify and Rumble not as destinations, but as massive global broadcast towers. They are essentially hijacking the modern infrastructure to deliver an ancient medicine.
Okay, I see that. It's guerrilla warfare. You're walking into the loudest, most visually chaotic nightclub in the world, plugging your own microphone into their massive sound system, and softly reciting a Shakespeare sonnet.
Exactly. And the way they organize the content on YouTube subverts the algorithm's desire for frantic clicking.
How so?
They don't just dump unorganized files, they act as expert curators. They build these massive, continuous master playlists. For example, their primary chronological playlist contains a seamless flow of broadcasts from show number 1 all the way through show number 5,000.
Wow.
You aren't meant to sit there and actively click a new video every 10 minutes. You are meant to press play, turn the screen over, and just let the audio fill the room for hours.
And they also use the platform for some really high-level literary analysis, which surprised me.
Oh, their deep dive series on YouTube is astonishingly thorough.
Yeah, they don't just give you the audio of a mystery. They give you the entire historical and philosophical context. Like, they recently did a project where they curated 13 classic radio mysteries that all featured the word blue in the title.
Right.
They played episodes like The Bluebeard of Balak, Blue Justice, The Blue Moon, and it all culminated with Chesterton's own Father Brown detective story, The Blue Cross.
But they didn't just play them sequentially, right?
No. They mapped out how the color blue functions as a literary symbol across different eras, representing melancholy, divine justice, obscurity, and hope. They're basically teaching their audience how to listen.
They are training the listener to look for the structural framework beneath the entertainment.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And for the listener who wants an entirely frictionless experience, like someone who wants to completely bypass the algorithm and the paradox of choice, Chesterton Radio built what might be their most brilliant digital room.
The Open Door live stream.
Yes, the Open Door.
That is hosted on their dedicated website, live.chestertonradio.com, and they also mirror it on Rumble.
Explain the psychology behind the Open Door, because I think it solves one of the most exhausting problems of modern media consumption.
The problem of decision fatigue.
Exactly.
If you log into any major streaming service tonight, you will likely spend 25 minutes endlessly scrolling through grids of tiles, watching auto-playing trailers, trying to decide what perfectly matches your exact mood.
Only to get so overwhelmed that you just turn it off and go to sleep.
Yes, we've all done it. But the Open Door completely eliminates decision fatigue. It is a continuous 204/7 live stream. It is literally an old radio that never gets switched off.
So comforting.
If you're working the night shift at a hospital, or you're a long-haul trucker driving across the Midwest at 3 a.m., or you're just someone struggling with insomnia who needs to break the oppressive silence of an empty house, you don't have to choose.
You just click the Open Door?
You step into a broadcast that is already in progress. It might be a sweeping historical drama, a lighthearted comedy, or a tense thriller. You let the station dictate the pace.
And there's immense psychological comfort in knowing that somewhere out there, a human curator arranged this schedule.
Yeah, not a bot.
A human. And other listeners around the world are hearing the exact same words at the exact same moment. It completely restores the communal aspect of broadcasting.
But, the audio streams are only half of the architecture here. To truly understand the intellectual depth of Chesterton Radio, we have to look at their Substack.
Oh, absolutely. If YouTube is the front porch and the Open Door is the living room, Substack is the library.
It's the written memory of the station.
Yes. This is where they publish their essays, original short stories, behind-the-scenes production notes, and their ongoing letters from the little station. They even use it as a launching pad for future books.
I spent hours on their Substack preparing for this deep dive, and the caliber of the writing is just remarkable.
It's not just a newsletter.
No, it isn't just a newsletter telling you what shows are playing next week. It is a full-on cultural magazine. There was one specific essay that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
Which one?
It was titled The Common Thread, and it attempted to draw a philosophical connection between Brian Wilson, the musical genius behind the Beach Boys,
Okay.
and Father Brown, G.K. Chesterton's fictional, unassuming Catholic priest who solves murders.
Wait, really? That is a staggering juxtaposition.
Right. On the surface, a 1960s California pop music icon and a 1910s British theological detective have zero overlap.
How did the essay possibly synthesize them?
It approached them through the lens of architectural harmony and the human desire to bring order out of chaos.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the essay analyzed the complex, revolutionary vocal harmonies of the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds album. Brian Wilson was famously obsessed with finding the perfect combination of notes to create this almost spiritual resonance in the listener.
Right, he was trying to build these intricate cathedrals of sound.
Exactly, to combat the chaos and anxiety in his own mind. And then the essay pivoted to the structure of a classic locked-room murder mystery, specifically the way Father Brown approaches a crime scene.
Because a murder is the ultimate act of chaos.
Yes, it breaks the moral order of the universe. And Father Brown doesn't just look for clues like footprint sizes or cigar ash. He looks for the spiritual and psychological truth that restores order to that chaos.
Wow.
The essay argued that a perfectly crafted pop symphony, a Shakespearean soliloquy, and a tightly woven 1940s radio mystery are all participating in the exact same grand human conversation.
They are all expressions of the moral imagination striving for beauty.
Exactly. It blew my mind.
That is exceptional cultural synthesis. And it proves that Chesterton Radio is not merely preserving the past, they're actively putting it into conversation with the present.
Which is why they also use Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Right, to maintain this rhythm on a daily basis. For the listener who is commuting, driving, or just walking the dog, they offer their daily morning prayer podcast on those platforms.
Because it isn't just audio dramas. They provide a daily reflection rooted in scripture, traditional church prayers, and Chestertonian philosophy.
There's a line they wrote about this daily rhythm that really stuck with me. They said, "Every ordinary day is a holy beginning. Holiness is usually found not on mountaintops, but in today's work, today's kindness, today's prayer."
They are using Spotify, a platform that is usually dominated by, true crime and hyper-produced celebrity interviews, to deliver a quiet, centering moment of daily contemplation.
It's totally subversive. And then, to weave all these disparate platforms together, they utilize X, formerly Twitter.
All right.
X serves as the telegraph wire for the community. It's the real-time connective tissue. They use it to share historical photos, literary quotes, and announce new deep dive explorations.
Yeah, I've seen that.
You might be scrolling through your feed of breaking political news and sudden outrage, and suddenly you see a post from Chesterton Radio announcing a new audio exploration of Neville Shute's novel, Trustee from the Tool Room, exploring the quiet, dignified heroism of an ordinary model engineer.
Or an analysis of John Dixon Carr, who is the undisputed master of the impossible locked room mystery.
Right. It acts as a continuous tether, pulling the listener back toward wonder.
Hold on. Just listen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's definitely a vintage plane flying directly over Commercial Street. I love that we left the microphones hot for this.
It's loud.
As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we are broadcasting this from a little station right in the middle of Atchison, Kansas, during the Amelia Earhart Festival. The streets outside our window are absolutely packed.
And this physical location is the final crucial element to understanding the soul of Chesterton Radio.
Why is that?
Because the internet is fundamentally placeless. Placelessness is the defining characteristic of the digital age.
That's a good point.
You can listen to a highly polished podcast, and it could be recorded in a multi-million-dollar corporate studio in Manhattan, or a soundproofed closet in a basement in London, and it sounds exactly the same.
It has no geography.
Right. It has no weather, it has no local culture, it just exists in the digital ether. But Chesterton Radio explicitly and repeatedly roots itself in a specific physical geography. They constantly refer to the little station on Commercial Street.
But why does that matter? Why does it matter to the listener in Tokyo or Berlin that this station is physically located in a small river town in the American Midwest?
Because it provides an anchor. When a listener tunes in, they aren't just floating in cyberspace. They are tethered to something tangible. They can imagine the brick streets outside the window. They can hear the train whistle blowing across the Missouri River.
It grounds it.
It grounds the high-minded philosophical discussions in the dirt, brick, and humidity of real life. And by anchoring themselves in Atchison, they are intentionally aligning themselves with the spirit of the town's most famous daughter, Amelia Earhart.
And this weekend, July 17th and 18th, the entire town is celebrating Earhart's legacy.
They are.
And Chesterton Radio recently produced this brilliant, localized deep dive, tying her story directly to the golden age of radio. They explored an episode of the prestigious classic radio documentary series, Cavalcade of America.
Yes.
The episode was titled Toward a Farther Star, and it dramatized Amelia's life and her final fateful flight.
But they didn't just play the audio file and leave it at that, did they?
No, they actually took the listener on an auditory walking tour of Atchison. They connected the radio broadcast to the physical Amelia Earhart Birthplace Museum, sitting high on the bluffs overlooking the river. They discussed the new Amelia Earhart Hangar Museum located here in town, which is this incredible facility that actually houses the absolute last remaining Lockheed Electra 10E.
Let's talk about the Lockheed Electra for a second, because understanding that machine is vital to understanding the scale of what she attempted.
It's wild to look at in person.
It wasn't some hyper-computerized modern jet where you just push a button and an autopilot flies you across the ocean. It was a visceral analog machine powered by two massive Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engines. Flying it required immense physical skill, mathematical precision for celestial navigation, and raw nerve. Sitting in that cockpit, deafened by the roar of those engines, looking out over the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean with no GPS, it is almost impossible for a modern person to comprehend the sheer analog reality of that isolation.
Which is why Chesterton Radio approaches her story not merely as aviation trivia, but as a profound philosophical study in courage.
Exactly.
Amelia Earhart was one of the most admired figures of the 20th century, not just because she understood the mechanical aerodynamics of flight, but because she possessed a staggering moral imagination.
She looked at the horizon and she absolutely refused to accept that anything was beyond reach.
She shattered societal barriers for women, she set relentless speed and distance records, and she lived with this audacious sense of daring. It forces you to look in the mirror and ask a deeply uncomfortable question.
What's that?
What gives an ordinary person, born in a small, quiet town in Kansas, the internal fortitude to look up at the sky and say, I am going to fly a tin can full of highly flammable aviation fuel across the Atlantic Ocean entirely by myself?
It's insane when you phrase it like that.
I mean, most of us experience a spike in our heart rate just trying to parallel park on a busy street. Where does that extraordinary spark of defiance come from?
It comes from that word we keep returning to, wonder.
Wonder.
And this is where the station achieves its most brilliant synthesis. On the surface, if you were to draw a Venn diagram, an early 20th century British Catholic philosopher like G.K. Chesterton and an American female aviation pioneer like Amelia Earhart seem to exist in completely different universes.
They have no obvious overlap at all.
But the connective tissue between them is that they both aggressively fought against the gravity of the mundane.
They were both explorers. Chesterton explored the limitless, invisible horizons of theology, paradox, and literature. He was constantly marveling at the sheer, absurd miracle that the universe exists at all. And Earhart explored the literal, physical horizons of the Earth, marveling at the mechanical miracle of flight.
They both refused to let the world lose its sense of wonder.
That is just brilliant. By broadcasting from Earhart's hometown, Chesterton Radio is grounding the intellectual rigor of British philosophy in the practical, daring, roll-up-your-sleeves reality of the American Midwest.
It creates a completely unique cultural aesthetic.
It really does. But look, there is a massive elephant in the room that we have to address before we wrap up.
Okay, what is it?
Maintaining an independent cultural institution of this scale, one that actively refuses to rely on the standard internet monetization models of outrage algorithms, clickbait, or massive corporate sponsorships, that requires a very specific economic reality.
Oh, the funding model. Yes.
It requires a community that is actually willing to fund the rebellion. Because as we've noted, there is no massive corporate network underwriting Chesterton Radio. There is no billionaire tech foundation writing million-dollar grants to keep the open door streaming.
It is entirely 100% listener-supported.
But if you look at how they approach their audience for support, it completely flips the modern creator economy on its head.
Because the modern creator economy is entirely transactional. It's built on the SaaS model, software as a service.
Right.
You are a consumer. You pay a monthly subscription fee, you pass through a digital paywall, and you unlock exclusive content that is purposefully hidden from the rest of the public. You buy a product, you consume the product.
But Chesterton Radio rejects the consumer model entirely.
Totally. They frame their support through a platform called Buy Me a Coffee, but they don't treat it as a transactional paywall. They treat it as an invitation to become a character in the ongoing story of the station.
They use a tiered membership system, and they are incredibly intentional with the psychological framing of these tiers. They aren't selling you a product, they are offering you a role.
It's like joining a guild.
Yeah. Let's walk through the tiers. The entry level is called the Lamplighter tier. It's $5 a month.
Stop and consider the imagery of that title for a second. A lamplighter. It evokes the image of someone in 19th century London walking down the cobblestone streets at dusk, physically igniting the gas lamps to push back the darkness for their neighborhood.
I love that.
This tier is for the listener who simply wants to help keep the lights on at the little station. It provides the baseline foundational support for the daily morning prayer, the continuous classic radio streams, and the written essays. It is a quiet, vital act of participation.
Then the next level up is the station keeper at $15 a month. I love the romance embedded in that title. You aren't just holding the lamps, you are standing watch.
You're keeping the station open.
This level signifies a heavier commitment that sustains the labor-intensive work of restoring old audio files, producing new deep dive podcasts, and writing original fiction.
And as we move higher, the language shifts from maintenance to active creation. The producer circle, which is $30 a month.
What do they do?
Listeners who step into this role are directly funding the creation of completely new content. They are the reason the station can commission and produce brand new original Father Brown mysteries or new audio fiction. They are actually bringing new art into existence.
And above that is the Founders Circle at $60 a month, which the station refers to as the builders. These are the people laying the financial foundation for projects that haven't even been imagined yet. They are securing the future timeline of the station itself.
But the tier that truly fascinates me, the one that really explains the ethos of this entire community, is the Steward Circle at $120 a month, and its ultimate expression, the Founding Steward, which is a $365 one-time, lifetime commitment to the station.
I want to laser focus on that word, stewardship. Because they could have called it the VIP sponsor tier or the Platinum Executive Producer level, but they chose Steward. What is the profound psychological difference between a consumer and a steward?
Well, a consumer demands immediate personal gratification. A consumer says, I paid my money. What do I get in return right now?
Right. What's in it for me?
Exactly. A steward is a caretaker. A steward operates with a multi-generational mindset. When you act as a steward, you are preserving and protecting something of immense value, not just for your own immediate enjoyment, but to ensure that it survives for others to experience long after you are gone.
You know, it reminds me of the way art and architecture were funded during the Renaissance, or like the building of the great medieval cathedral.
Like barn raising almost.
Yeah, but on a grand scale.
Yeah.
Let's look at the Duomo in Florence or Notre Dame in Paris. The people who laid the foundation stones for those cathedrals knew with absolute certainty that they would be dead before the roof was ever finished.
Oh, for sure. It took centuries.
They were pouring their wealth, their labor, and their artistry into a structure they would never see completed. Why? Because they believed that beauty, truth, and community were eternal, and that they had a moral obligation to build a space where future generations could encounter the divine.
That is the exact dynamic Chesterton Radio is attempting to replicate in the digital age.
When a listener becomes a steward of the little station, they aren't buying exclusive access to a podcast. They are acting as modern patrons.
Because Chesterton Radio keeps the open door stream running 24 hours a day, completely free, with no paywalls for anyone in the world. They refuse to lock the doors to the library.
So the stewards are the people voluntarily buying the lumber to ensure the building remains standing for everyone else.
They are ensuring that a lonely teenager discovering Shakespeare for the first time, or an exhausted nurse driving home at 4 a.m. who just needs a comforting story, has free and open access to this sanctuary of wonder.
It is an incredible leap of faith. They are betting the entire existence of the station on the premise that human beings are still capable of immense generosity motivated by shared values, rather than just transactional greed.
And if you look at the growth of their subscriber base and the vibrancy of their community comments, the bet is absolutely paying off.
People are exhausted by the digital strip mall. They want to help build a cathedral. They want to be lamplighters and station keepers.
It proves that the hunger for depth, for narrative, and for wonder hasn't been eradicated by algorithms. It has just been starved. And Chesterton Radio is setting a very rich table.
If we zoom out and look at the total landscape of what we've discussed today, the evolution is undeniable. This is no longer just a YouTube channel playing old audio files.
Not at all.
It is a comprehensive, multi-platform cultural ecosystem. From the constant companionship of the Open Door livestream to the deep philosophical and theological synthesis happening on their Substack, to the podcast dissecting everything from the locked room mysteries of John Dixon Carr to the vocal harmonies of Brian Wilson.
And it is all tethered to the physical brick and mortar of Atchison, Kansas. echoing the boundless courage of Amelia Earhart.
It is a community sustained entirely by patrons who fundamentally believe that stories, ideas, and wonder are not optional luxuries, but essential nutrients for human flourishing.
Well said.
Well, looking at the desk here, the coffee pot is officially empty. And listening to the street outside, the Amelia Earhart Festival is really reaching a fever pitch.
I can hear a brass band warming up down on Commercial Street.
Yeah, and the crowds are definitely migrating toward the riverbanks to get a good spot for the evening air show and the concert in the sky fireworks. We should probably sign off and step out into the real world to join them.
It has been a truly fascinating exploration today. It is a reminder that even in the most accelerated, chaotic, technological era in human history, there are still quiet places where the fire is lit and a good story is waiting.
Absolutely. But before we hit the switch and turn off the on-air R sign, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on today.
Take it away.
We spent a lot of time talking about the theater of the mind and how the brain processes audio. We live in a society that is desperately trying to colonize every single second of your attention. Every app, every feed, every flashing screen is engineered to keep your eyes locked in, to shorten your attention span, and to feed you a prepackaged reality. In that environment, what happens to your own interior life if you never stop to simply listen?
It's a scary thought.
If you completely lose the cognitive ability to build the set in your own mind, do you lose a fundamental piece of your own humanity? I want you to consider the possibility that the simple act of turning off your screen, closing your eyes, and listening to a classic story on the radio isn't just a pleasant way to pass an hour. It might actually be the most profound, radical act of cultural rebellion you can participate in today. Think about it.
Such a great point.
Thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us here in the little station on Commercial Street. Keep chasing the horizon, keep fighting for wonder, and we will see you next time on The Deep Dive.